Hello, it's Cryptolyze. I hope you are well this Thursday, 28 September 2023. It is with pleasure that we meet today to talk crypto, to talk BTC, to talk oil, because yes, we had a big acceleration. We will explain why, how, the impact that it can have on BTC, but above all, we will talk about Gary Gensler of the SEC, what happened in his testimony to the American Senate. You will see that there are quite a few things. In any case, we really see that there is a drastic change in the USA, not necessarily positive, not necessarily negative, a little between the two, and it starts right away. We start with the SEC, which delayed the Ethereum ETFs, the ARK and VanEck ETFs. So it's rather classic. We expected it. We also know very well that this will be the case once again with Bitcoin. There is no doubt about that. Although when there was the discussion between Gary Gensler and certain senators, the last senator to pass explained well and even clearly said who was wondering about the fact that Gary Gensler was not doing deliberately to start delaying the validation of other ETFs, implied Grayscale, while the SEC lost the case against Grayscale, even if they appealed. And currently, we are still in a discussion. But currently, they have lost. And how come? It was the senator who explained this. How come you have not yet validated this spot ETF? Are you in contact with BlackRock? Are you in contact with other ETFs? So he didn't specify BlackRock, but hey, it's as if, really, it's like he said it. So overall, he explains, will the SEC favor certain big players like BlackRock? Well, afterwards, I admit that the rest of the discussion was very interesting on really the establishment of two camps. One, Democrats. Two, the Republicans who opposed each other, in particular the two most important being the two chairmen from the two opposing camps in which it was fought out. Really very, very complicated. On the one hand, we had someone who was precisely trying to give value to the SEC and to restore its importance, and who precisely made it possible to justify the actions of Gary Gensler, and another on the side who was more in a move to put pressure on Gary Gensler over his inability to provide the documents wanted by the Senate to validate his actions. Namely, that the Senate is waiting for documents that are not public from the SEC to determine whether the actions being carried out are already compliant and do they have an impact. And that Gary Gensler and the SEC are incapable of giving them. They have been asking for it for more than 10 months. And a priori, what was said clearly, it is basically either you give, there you have 10 days to give them to us, or we take legal action so that you can give them. And that is really serious. And that is precisely the reflection that was there above. This is the person asking the question. To Gary Gensler saying, are you going to give us these documents or not? And Gary Gensler did what he knows how to do very well. And what you have to do anyway in this type of hearing. I mean, you can't say yes or no. You can't give real answers when we shouldn't give them, because that's a bit like Gary Gensler's position to remind us. And so he made paraphrases, saying, don't worry, we'll work with you. Don't worry, we've provided you with 40,000 documents. We'll provide you with more others. Finally, there you go. The classic dodging. And clearly it has continually been dodging. No matter the questions that have been asked, whether on Bitcoin, is Bitcoin a securities? It's going to be very complicated to get an answer. And initially he asked, is Bitcoin a commodity? Impossible to get an answer. Is Bitcoin a securities? He managed to get an answer by saying, no, Bitcoin is not a securities. But is it a commodities? Impossible to get an answer. So it's interesting to see that, namely, that it was recalled that during those times when Gary Gensler was at MIT, he had ruled that a certain number of cryptos were commodities and not precisely securities. And who should we believe? The person from MIT or Gary Gensler from the SEC? Is it two separate people or one common person? On that, it was very complicated to answer. It was really very complicated to answer. And anyway, in all cases, the goal was not to provide answers. It was to simply have a bad time and wait for it to pass, to move around in circles and for it to pass. So what I really appreciated in this approach was, above all, the intervention of the deputy, the senator, Torres, which was really interesting in the sense that he explained the notion of investment contract. It's really, okay, the investment contract. Okay, we know that there is an investment, but does it absolutely have to have a contract? And that was impossible, the same, to make him confess. But he did, Mr. Torres, Congressman Torres, something interesting. He mainly compared it to a Pokemon card. If I ever buy a Pokemon card on the street or in a store, classic, physical, is it a security? Clearly, Guy Gensler answered no. And so, at that moment, the senator responded saying, okay, but if I buy this same card, exactly the same, but in the form of a digitalized NFT, is it a securities contract? And there, the answer was very, very complicated. Overall, Gary Gensler told him, I don't know, we have to wait, get additional information, et cetera, et cetera. And so it ended like this. Okay, so at that point, you separate at the technology level. That is to say, you are not neutral at the technology level. Technology, and maybe that's the problem, and time was running out. It's a shame because here we really arrived at something which was relatively strong, and I think that the discussion must be open more widely on this type of element and clearly understand the notion that it is an investment or not. I think that I will certainly make a video one weekend on it to answer what is a securities really, and what are the tokens which fall into the notion of securities and the tokens which do not. They're not there because there are a number of laws that are really clear, rules that are clear to determine whether it's security or not, and you will see that there are actually not that many when you really respect the rules of the art. And I think I'll do something separate for you. Besides, we have an article, that's it, which is in the process of coming out according to which Bitcoin is starting to have a divergence in terms of its correlation compared to liquidity. So implied behind that it is the bounds, whether it is actions. Yes, I've been talking to you about this for a long time, and that's it. It's starting to come out. Contrary to the general idea where Bitcoin had failed in its ability to be resilient in the face of a fall in the SPF 500, that's the same. I think I should make a really specific video on it, or otherwise we'll talk about it Sunday, near October. If you don't know what's happening Sunday, near October, I invite you to mark my calendar Sunday, near October 18 on YouTube. I'm doing a live. It's been a long time since I've done one, and we'll discuss lots of topics. It's up to you to ask me questions to prepare the topics you want to discuss. We'll do a live like that way. I think I'll have a topic or two to talk about, but basically I will expect questions and elements from you. In order to facilitate conversation and the sharing of ideas, it is essential to establish a setting where individuals feel comfortable expressing their thoughts. This is especially important when discussing the topic of oil prices. In recent times, oil prices have skyrocketed to an astonishing $1.95 per barrel, primarily due to factors such as the decrease in U.S. stocks. As previously mentioned, when prices fall below $1.80, it is an opportune moment for the U.S. to bolster its reserves. Conversely, when prices surpass $1.80, it puts a strain on the economy. Overall, this is a bit of what is happening, and so at a given moment, we know that there will no longer be U.S. reserves, so we have an anticipation effect. And in any case, we see it that since 2005, we have had a reduction in real imports in terms of oil with an increase in production. But we know that production is maxed out at the level of the USA, so it is complicated to be able to produce more, even if there is a real discussion about transforming Canada and really exploiting Canadian oil resources, but that's another discussion. I think we will have to come back to it. What do we have today? We have the GDP 1430. We have Powell 22's speech. Very important. I think we risk having more of the great Powell on it to hit very hard, because here is what we have. We have the oil that broke the 93, which is in the process of consolidating above the 94. The next level we have here is the 97. As a reminder, I cut my nail here. I kept only 9% to be able to accompany the movement. Always this principle. When you have a flow, even if you cut a large part of your positions, always keep a small part of your positions. It always helps to return if necessary. I think I will return if I ever have a big pullback at some point, which is not a distribution, but I remain with the idea, as I explained to you, of perhaps having a distribution at the level here of oil with a BC, ARST, SOW, Utah, UTAD. See if the UTAD is very high. For me, the next level could be 97, but the struggle is not over. All right. Obviously, we have to have a retracement, a retest, and then start something that would look like this, where we would have hop there. We would have a very nice distribution. As long as we don't have that, well, we go backwards and we're always in a long flow and we gain distance from that. From the distance, because we filled the gap there already at the level of the CME, we made a big wick. We went to get the objective at the pixel, near one of 4,276. We are really in Fibonacci extensions. We see that this has been respected exactly. Will this continue? There, in any case, we had a first valuation. Clearly, there are some people who took their profit. That's why we got this valuation here. They buy back this wick. So here we are in something classic. We are in the process of consolidating exactly at the level of this top. So it is completely normal. And here we will have to see if we consolidate above with a little retest and then sink in. It's a little bit something that I'm anticipating to get the 1.618, and I see that I'm not the only one because the VIX continues to increase in value. We are still in an increase in the VIX, so that implies that people are hedging for a bearish continuity, but if we want to hedge, we could very well go to BTC. Because look at this pretty candle that we have here in weekly overall. There is no candle. It's a line. It's totally flat because there is no volatility in BTC. It's interesting to see that one of the assets that is supposed to be the most volatile, crypto, is still less volatile and much less volatile than the S&P 500 currently. And it's very interesting to see that because we still have this notion of resilience and the fact that it's starting to appear in the press. So, hey, it's the specialized crypto press. So obviously we will have the crypto valuation. It's the same. After specialized here, we say that Gary Gensler takes a sauce, but that is not the case. Clearly, it was shared. There were the Republicans and the Democrats. So we take a step back from that, but this is very interesting because we really have a resilience of BTC, which is really very strong. And when we look here short term, we went to get exactly the 26,800. So really exactly to the millimeter, the level that we had defined, the imbalance which was filled. So there we were wire for here, this movement that I cut when I saw that we had a facelift here. I directly received just this little movement there to take a little bit of the profits because precisely I found that the reaction was relatively low. I would have let it run if we ever had broken the 25,994. This is not the case. If we went to look for the lots, I would certainly still be in a position to go and rework the lower part there. This is not the case. So for me, we are more in a form of retest, but I preferred to lock part of the profits, namely that I locked 2% x10, therefore 20%, which were returned. Namely that here, when we are in a form of retest, there we went to retest a large part of the imbalance of the bearish movement. Will it be strong enough to cause the decline? I do not think so. There currently we are more in a retest which should have been carried out but which is not. So we are more in a structural manipulation. When we look at the order flow here, we see it clearly with a real effective increase in open interest. So these are the levers which are put, whether short or long, in the positions. And we see that we had an increase in the root. So that means that the movement that was made is a manipulated movement, potentially by an increase in shorts. Very strong, in which we can clearly see here the contraction of costs, therefore implying the increase in shorts during the increase in open interest. So we had a small short squeeze to then do a small long squeeze. So we is in something which is relatively classic, and therefore we are careful because we went to get all the liquidity which was above. We still have all the liquidity which is below, which I am waiting for, but it is not because I wait until we go get them. Why? Because the BTC movement following this liquidation take was not strong enough. Clearly, we weren't strong enough. We didn't go for the 26,000. We didn't go for all that liquidity. We stopped just before. We had momentum that moved even though we had very little liquidity. And so for me, the upward movement is not over. And this is where it is interesting that we will have to take a little step back. We will look on the liquidation map. You will see that we still have these large blocks which are present. Wouldn't we have a bullish intention that we are currently giving to go and do precisely this bull trap that we defined at the beginning of the week and go and liquidate the 28,000 zones here, or even potentially fetch much higher? We still have these targets here high. As a reminder, we zoom out a little. We have our bearish divergence. We have a first hostess. But overall, here in this flow, we could very well be in an effective bullish impulse, which would bring us elsewhere. I haven't pulled it, but we're going to pull it right away. It's going to give me, do we have a confluence or not? Do we have an alignment of indicators to tell us? I'm not exactly precise, but we're going to put it well. Here we would therefore have a target 1-1, which corresponds exactly to our test here at 28,800. Wouldn't we be in a bullish impulse to get the retest here and then make this bearish breakout? So that's kind of the idea that we've had for a while here, bearish breakout. We tidy up, we will do the retest, we will then search lower, so either retest 25,000 or break 25,000 and search much lower. Namely that the more resilient we are in relation to the S&P 500, the more my 20,000 bias decreases. Clearly, the more my 20,000 bias decreases. I will certainly talk to you about that in a weekend video or potentially in the live as a reminder, live on air, October 18 on YouTube. And yes, I know I'm inciting, but it's so rare that I do lives. And you ask me so much in the comments that it's important for me to tell you. And I hope you like this video. If that's the case, don't forget to leave me a like and a comment. Always makes me very happy. and we meet again at 13:30 for an analysis of a crypto that I have not yet defined because I am a little late. And yes, it happens to me even when I get up very early. And so we meet at 13:30 for a surprise.